Welcome back, Therapy Flow. We're excited to dive into some numbers today. Little numbers that become big numbers really quickly when you're in private practice. Today, we're going to be breaking down some just small incremental percentage changes and maybe reshape, reform the way that you think about how numbers add up in your practice and where leverage even comes from when you're making changes. So we're going to be going through anywhere from ad performance to intake success to clinical longevity and some of those different layers, and showing you 6 critical places that if you make some clear, distinct, small percentage improvements, it will have massive gains across the entire business. Let's dive in.
Yeah, I think if you have ever followed me or any of the information that I've provided, you've probably seen some information about the way that I see business as like this bow tie. And in between this bow tie, there's all these rates of things that happen. If you're like an engineer, this is like throughput. And if you're not an engineer, imagine you're trying to stick a hose, like a bunch of water through a hose, but the hose is really, really small or the hose is really, really big. If the hose is small in one spot and big in the other spot, the water is just not going to go through at the same rate that you want it to. And so finding those little segments, that's exactly what this is. There's little breakthroughs that when you change the rate of flow by a percent, oftentimes that can be significant. And so when you're looking at it from the top of your business, like the attention portion of your business, you need to get attention first. Some of the things that we look at for attention or, that marketing and sales segments are going to be your click-through rates, your conversion rates, the rates that you connect with your clients, the close rates, and things like your churn rate. Those are all big factors that moving from 6% to 7% can be a huge cascade for your practice.
When you think about it this way, moving from 1% success to 2% isn't a 1% improvement. It's actually 100% improvement. When we think about something like your Psych Today profile, you get 100 views and maybe 6 leads come from it. That'd be a 6% conversion rate. If we get that number from 6% and we move it to 12%, that it actually doubles your conversion rate. And so, yeah, it's a 6%, increase or improvement, but it moves towards 100% improvement on some of these pieces. And most of your numbers in your private practice probably exist somewhere between the 1% and the 30% range of success when you measure. Oh, we've got a 25% intake close rate. Oh, we have a 1% landing page conversion rate. You're actually living in this land of small percentage points that if we can move that by 1%, 5%, 10% up in the other direction, it's actually not just small changes, but big changes over time. And so it's sometimes less about doubling your revenue overnight or hiring vaguely to fill out clinical capacity or quote unquote doubling your lead volume. Sometimes it's just going from 1% and moving to 2% to get a full 100% increase. So let's dive into kind of 6 places that can add up. The first one we've talked about often, and that's just session rate. If you charge about $1 more a session because you have volume on your side and your clinical caseload stays full that entire year, or for your clinicians it does, a $1 fee increase on your session rate is typically more than $1,000 of annual revenue across that next year. If you have 35 clinicians on your team, that's $35,000 of annual corrected revenue. And I know almost any practice, right, that's watching this right now, you would gladly take $35,000 more in your pocket from a $1 fee increase. Now, all of you can make that happen, but even thinking about it through like negotiating your insurance contracts, you don't need a 10, a 20, a $50 jump sometimes for it to make a difference. You might need a 50-cent or a $1 or a $5 jump to really see that number add up over time for your practice's benefit.
Yeah, this is a volume space. I know some of you who watch these videos are solo practices, so you kind of have to bear with us here. But this really is a volume space. There's clinicians, they see lots of sessions. It's kind of like healthcare, right? A doctor wants to have a lot of patients and he's productive in his practice in that situation. And so as the volume keeps stacking, another place that we get to look at is it has to be your intake close rate. This is sort of the first big nozzle between what you've spent or the time and energy that you've spent on your marketing or even your referral relationships or other partnerships or whatever. This is sort of that first huge bottleneck where if your intakes don't go anywhere, you kind of lose all of that money. So this is a really big, important bottleneck. And if we're looking at cash practices or insurance practices, you may be able to work with more or less of the market innately. And so what we've seen for insurance practices is about 40 to 60% intake close rate, and maybe cash practices are landing in this like 10 to 15% range for how they're closing or who they're closing. And so if you're getting like 50 calls a month, if you change that from 15% intake close to 25% intake close, that's the difference between 13 clients instead of 7 clients. And so this is a really big bottleneck here for your practice. And if you break it down to what is capitalizing the most, this may be one of your bigger bottlenecks.
Let's talk about the reverse, which is saving money or moving a cost down for something like cost per lead. We talk a lot about it, and this exists for any marketing channel. You have your quote unquote cost per lead. Let's say you're running your Google ads and you spend on average $60 to get one person reaching out to your therapy practice through that ad channel. If you can decrease your cost per lead by 10%, that's $54 on average cost per lead. If we do the math across the next year, you'll, number one, just from that 10% decrease, save more than $1,000 probably that next year on Google ads. But more importantly, that small couple dollar change, if you just spend the same amount of money, would lead to 22 additional clients, or essentially a full therapist's caseload of weekly sessions for that many new intakes by a 10% or a $6 average cost per lead change. And sometimes it can be much greater than that when the work is done properly. So there's numbers to squeeze in up or down for success here. And our team is constantly looking at that average cost per lead that our Google accounts are getting for the practices and saying, how can we move this lower? Because we know it's going to add up a lot over the next 12 months.
Yeah. The next really large one here is session retention. This could also be labeled churn. Basically, this is how many sessions or what percentage of your clients are dropping off at a certain milestone. And so a lot of private practices kind of gauge the success of a clinician if they sort of hold a clinician between that 8 to 12 session range. And if you're saying like, hey, my clients stick around for 10 sessions, and you move that from 10 to 11, so this is just a 10% increase, you're going to see much higher lifetime value. You're going to see a higher return on investment from your marketing. Your staff utilization is going to be much higher, and you have to fill less people less frequently, and the fixed clinician costs drop as well because you don't have to put in as much effort to keep that person generating the way that they need to be generating. And what's really cool about this space too is sometimes you get clients that just love you and they stick around forever pretty much, and they just continue to work on themselves through the therapist, right? Or whoever it is that they're working with. And so the higher likelihood that the more clients that you're working with, the higher likelihood that you get forever clients, and the more forever clients that you get, the higher utilization, the higher session retention that you have, and the just overall better utilization that your clients or that your therapists are.
Here's a critical piece of information you need if you're doing email marketing for your private practice. And that's usually you have a 1 to 3% like click rate on the emails you send. And so if you send an email like I send a weekly newsletter. If you send a weekly newsletter to a list of 5,000 people and only 2% actually click on that, that's about 100 people actually clicking or engaging with the content as they open it up and read it. And you're doing that on a weekly basis. If you can work on your call to actions inside of that email, the language you're writing, the consumption that's there, and measure this and get that and move it from a 2% up to a 4%. That's again a 100% increase. And that moves you from 100 people clicking on this to 200 people actually clicking on this and maybe taking the next action to the calendar or reading that blog or grabbing that free resource or whatever it is you're pushing. And so this is one of those really critical scenarios when you're doing email marketing, that looking at this small number and saying you don't need to double your list necessarily. You just might need to improve your call to actions inside of your email in order to get better engagement and better click-through rates on the work that you're already putting in.
Yeah. And I get the fun one. The last one that we have on our list today is going to be profit margins, guys. So if your practice is running at like a 10% profit margin, and maybe you make $1 million a year, that's $100,000 of profit for the year. And then just moving that from 10% to 11%, that's going to be an extra $10,000 of profit. And that's not I feel like it's really easy to just like chip away at that 1%. It's like, I just need to move it 1% in a positive direction. And oftentimes that just means making small tweaks here and there. And so the budget that you're maybe building for your practice is built on solid dollars, but your profit is built on percentages here. So, and I would say the like leadership payout is as well, right? It's all these like leveraged percentages. And so how much value you can provide at what scale, that's all going to be based on percents. And finding those little edges is oftentimes where all the magic happens.
It's one of the reasons why when we partner with our group practices and our practices in general for their growth, understanding use cases, not just for marketing success, but these layers across marketing, intake, recruitment, your systems and operations, your profit levers, having a holistic conversation about all of these pieces. Then when you talk about where do we need to invest in marketing, or what do we need to solve with the intake team, or what goals do we need to hit, what's reasonable, what's possible for the stage of practice that you're in, we act as a partner to navigate all of those different layers. And so if you're looking for even just more than a marketing provider and a full marketing partner that understands and can help with growth in general for your practice, make sure you grab a time on our calendar and we can walk you through some of those elements and unpack what that means for your practice and the stage of growth that you're in. We'll catch you guys next time.